Hello guys and welcome back to FatbossTV, Loz here, and just like the Mistweaver Monk preview, this video is a first look at the new balanced Druid on the Legion Alpha. Now in this video we're not going to be going super in depth as the content on the Alpha is slightly limited, but there's certainly enough for me to go over all the new talents, the new spells, the artifact system, as well as showing you how it actually works in combat situations, and hopefully from this video you'll get enough to sort of see how Blizzard are looking for Boomkins to be in the next expansion. Now every class has been overhauled, and with this overhaul they've also scrapped a lot of spells. So what have Boomkins lost? Well, Astral Communion is now gone. It is in fact now a talent but works completely different. We'll talk about talents in just a moment. Cyclone is gone. You still have Bear and Cat form, but all abilities associated with those particular forms are completely gone unless you actually run a certain talent. We'll get to that in just a moment as well. Hurricane is gone. Remove Corruption is gone, so you can no longer remove curses and poisons. Soothe is gone, which means you can no longer dispel enrages. Stampeding Roar has been removed from Boomkin. Wild Mushroom has been removed. But most notably, the Eclipse bar is gone, and instead you now have something called Astral Power. Now this new resource bar is generated by pressing certain abilities, and it is spent by pressing certain abilities as well as talents, and again we'll go over them in just a moment. And with the Eclipse bar gone, there is also a new mastery in play. All this mastery does is just increases the damage of Starfall and Star Surge, and also increases the bonuses that they give. So what's new and what do Boomkins still have? Well, you still have Moonfire, and you still have Sunfire. However, because Eclipses no longer exist, these are now two separate buttons, just like how it used to be a couple of years back, where you can just press one or the other as much as you like, and you can have both of them up on the target straight away without having to press Celestial Alignment or anything like that. So that's quite a nice change. Moonfire is an 18-second dot, and Sunfire is a 14-second dot. Now Wrath has been renamed to Solo Wrath. This is a 1.5-second cast that generates 9 astral power, and Starfire has been replaced with an ability called Lunar Strike. This is a 2.5-second cast that deals more damage than Solar Wrath, and it also deals damage to enemies around the target. And this generates 15 astral power, but it is a much longer cast. Now as for your astral power spenders, they are Star Surge and Starfall. Now Star Surge is still an instant cast, and it costs 40 astral power. It deals a large amount of damage, and gives your Lunar Strike and Solar Wrath 1 stack of empowerment. Now the empowerment that it gives them is just a flat damage increase on the next cast that you actually deal with those abilities. Now the empowerment effect doesn't stack, but you can hold up to 3 charges for each spell, and they work individually. So if you say Star Surge 3 times in a row, you'd have 3 stacks on each, making it so the next 3 times you cast that ability, they deal extra damage, and that extra damage does scale with your mastery. As for Starfall, instead of being an aura around you that just deals damage to more or less everything, Starfall is now placed in a single location and lasts 8 seconds. This does cost 60 astral power, and you can only ever have 1 Starfall location active at a time. Enemies within the Starfall location actually take increased damage from Moonfire and from Sunfire. Now you still have Celestial Alignment. The way that it works now is that instead of making it so you can apply both dots with one, and that you have the bonuses of both Eclipse, obviously all that shit's gone. Now all it does is simply give you a 30% damage increase for 15 seconds, and on top of that, it makes it so while it is active, Lunar Strike and Solar Wrath generate extra astral power. They've also decided to bring Innovate back. This is an ability that you can cast on a player, and it allows that player to regen 20% of their maximum mana over 10 seconds. And this ability can also be empowered by your artifact in one way or another. We'll talk about that when we actually get to that part. As for all the other spells, you still have you've got your Bart Skin, works exact same way, exact same cooldown. You still have Bear form, you still get the bonus armor and the stamina from it. You got your Cat form, which is your movement speed increase, you still have Prowl with it. Moonkin form, it still gives you the bonus armor and your bonus damage to spells, but importantly you still have Alkin Frenzy. And this again is empowered by your artifact and is actually very, very important. We'll touch on that in just a moment. You still have Entangling Roots, you still have Healing Touch, you still have Rebirth, and you still have Solar Beam. So there are all the abilities that you have right now. How does this look in certain combat situations? Well, on a single target, you still want to have your Moonfire up, you still want to have your Sunfire up, and then ultimately you need to choose whether to press Solar Wrath or Lunar Strike, as they're the only ways of generating astral power, at least without talents, which again, we'll talk about in just a moment. So ultimately, single target, you want to be spamming Solar Wrath because it's the quicker cast, and it's more efficient than Lunar Strike. And then as soon as you have enough astral power, you Star Surge, and then you go back to your Solar Wraths, and you just spam that over and over again. It may actually be worth to keep Starfall up on a single target. It doesn't deal more damage than Star Surge when you compare the astral power costs, but the fact that it increased the damage that the enemy takes from Moonfire and Sunfire over the course of its duration by a large percentage is probably worth it. I'm not sure completely. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not going to sit here and do all the math behind it, but that could potentially be the case. And definitely in an AoE situation, that's what you want to be doing. You want to multi-dot, you want to put Starfall down, you want to make sure that you keep Starfall up so you press it every 8 seconds, and then you just want to be spamming Lunar Strike providing the mobs are stacked, because when you Lunar Strike one target, it's going to deal damage to all the targets around it, as well as damaging the initial target. And then, of course, you do have Celestial Alignment as a cooldown. You would use this on the pool, or you use it when you need to nuke down a certain ad, or whatever situation requires you to do that extra damage. So that's just the standard gameplay. However, it is affected greatly by your talents. So let's just move straight in and let's talk about all the new ones. We're not going to go over all the old ones like we did in the Mistweaver video. I don't think that's necessary here. That's literally only talk about the new ones. So on your 15 line, you have Shooting Stars, Warrior of the Elune, and Star-Lord. Shooting Stars makes it so your Moonfire and Starfire have a chance to deal extra damage. It's not a lot of damage, but more importantly, they have a chance to generate astral power. Now, if you're in a situation there's a lot of mobs up, and you have Moonfire and Sunfire on everything, the amount of astral power you generate is insane. You barely need to cast Solar Wrath or Lunar Strike to generate. You can pretty much just do it off your dots. However, if the dots are only on a single target, the amount of astral power you're generating isn't all that impressive. So in an AoE situation, this is insane. In a single target situation, not all that strong. Warrior of Elune actually gives you a spell. When you hit this spell, it makes it so your next 2 Lunar Strikes have absolutely no cast time whatsoever, and this is a 45-second cooldown. Now, this ability might seem a little bit underwhelming, but it's actually really strong, because when you are dealing damage single target, you're not going to be using your empowered stacks of your Lunar Strike, because it's just such a long cast, and you can pretty much always have empowered Solar Wraths. By having this talent, you can make it so you can dump some of those empowered Lunar Strikes, not only making it so they deal more damage, but also you'll be getting more astral power than if you're casting Wrath. So potentially this is the best one single target. However, the next talent, Star-Lord, when your solar and lunar spells are empowered, their cast time is reduced by 10%, and they're pretty much empowered all the time. This might actually be a flat damage increase in comparison to Warrior of Elune. Again, that's something that someone's going to have to work out, but I've got a feeling they might be quite close. As for your 30 line, you have Renewal, Displacer Beast, and Wild Charge. These work exactly the same as they do on live in every single way. Renewal just instantly heals you, Displacer Beast allows you to blink forward and you get a movement speed increased, and Wild Charge gives you some form of utility based on what form you're currently in. Now your 45 line is your Affinity line. Now as you remember earlier, I was talking about how all the individual forms you have, so your bear form, your cat form, everything like that, you've lost all the abilities that are associated with those particular forms. Well, this talent tree line gives you those abilities back, as well as giving you a passive. So the Feral Affinity increases your movement speed by 15% and will also give you Shred, Rip, Ferocious Bite, and Swipe. I don't really get this line. I mean, I get the passive. The passive's nice. But Shred, Rip, Ferocious Bite, and Swipe do not do more damage than your normal Boomkin rotation in any situation. So I think they're there for lols more than anything else. The same kind of goes for the Guardian one. The passive reduces your damage taken by 10%. It also gives you Taunt, Mangle, Thrash, Iron Fur, and Frenzied Regeneration. So you could argue, well, maybe you go into bear form for a bit of survivability, which is totally true. When you go in bear form, you get extra health and everything, as well as like a load of armor and stuff. So yeah, I guess you could argue that, but I think more than anything, you're going literally for the passive here, which is the damage reduction taken by 10%. As for the resto one, it makes it so you heal for 4% of your maximum health every 5 seconds, and if you're at max health, you'll heal someone else instead. This also gives you Rejuve, Regrowth, and Swift Mend. None of the heals that are given to you, I would argue, are as strong as Healing Touch, and you have Healing Touch anyway. But in almost all situations here, especially in raiding situations, I think you're just going to flat out pick the damage reduction one here, or the one that heals you for 5% of your maximum health every 5 seconds. Now, the level 60 talents, this is your CC line. Mass Entanglement and Typhoon are the exact same as live. However, you do have Mighty Bash. This is a 10-yard range stun that lasts for 5 seconds and can be used in all shapeshift forms, and it's a 50-second cooldown. So, Boomkins with stuns. What do you know? Now, as for your 75 talents, this is your damage line. Soul of the Forest is a passive that increases the damage dealt from your lunar and solar empowerments by an additional 15%. So after you've done a Star Surge and your Lunar Strike and your Solar Wrath have 1 stack of empowerment, the next time you use them, they just deal flat 15% more damage. Incarnation increases all your spell damage by 15% for 30 seconds. This is a 3-minute cooldown. And Stellar Flare is a 24-second long dot. but in order to apply it to your target, you need to consume an empowered stack of Lunar and an empowered stack of Solar to actually hit the target. Out of all of these talents, I assume Soul of the Forest is probably going to be the biggest damage increase because your Lunar Strikes and Solar Wraths are pretty much empowered all the time, so that'd just be a flat 15% damage increase on them forever. As for Incarnation, I guess it's kind of nice at the start of the fight when you have Bloodlust and, you know, you can just pump out loads of spells and be doing a lot of damage for 30 seconds. That's good, I guess. The Stellar Flare, I really like it. The way that it uses both an empowered stack of Lunar and Solar. It's really, really easy to pull off. You can do it immediately after you've done your first Star Surge. And it does deal quite a large amount of damage, but I'm going to assume Soul of the Forest is best in this line. Now, your level 90 talents, they're also a DPS line. You have Stellar Drift. This increases the radius of Starfall by 30%, and the damage it deals by 20%. And one super fucking amazing thing about it is that while you're inside the Starfall area, you can cast all of your abilities while moving. So unlike the current live Boomkin, while you're moving, you're not just forced to reapply dots. You now can cast, you can do whatever you want, and this is awesome. This is such a good talent. And with the potential of using Starfall on single targets just to increase the damage that your dots are dealing, as well as this talent also increasing the damage of Starfall, this may well be the one that you would use all the time. In the 5-mans who are running it, I absolutely love this talent. Being able to cast and move is so satisfying as a Boomkin, especially when your Lunar Strikes have got a 2.5 second cast. The other talent is Force of Nature. This just summons Treants that will taunt enemies on live. It only immobilizes them. And these Treants last for 15 seconds. However, it's a 2-minute cooldown. These Treants do quite a lot of damage. The taunt aspect, I think, isn't going to be too relevant in raids. Maybe in dungeons it could help, and out in the world, sure, it's definitely going to help. But yeah, I'm not overly convinced by this talent. It didn't feel that strong. And the last talent is Nature's Balance. This makes it so your Lunar Strike extends your Moonfire duration by 6 seconds, and your Solar Wrath extends your Sunfire duration by 4 seconds, so it's very similar to the talent that's on live. This on a single target may well be better than using the Starfall one, especially, you know, it's not worth using Starfall on a single target for the extra dot damage. Being able to extend the duration of these dots so you don't have to reapply them is really nice. Considering the dots now, their duration is significantly less than what it is on live service. It's about a third of the duration, so this may well be the talent that you pick. It seems very, very strong. On your level 100 line, you have Collapsing Stars. Now, this ability does a large amount of initial damage, and then deals additional damage per second until all your astral power is exhausted. It initially costs 10 astral power, and then plus 10 every second, and it replaces Celestial Alignment. This ability is a 2-minute cooldown. However, if there's enough targets up, and you're, say, running with the talent Shooting Stars, so every single time your dots tick, you have a chance to generate extra astral power, you can actually keep this dot up forever. While keeping dots up on 4 targets, it actually got to the stage where this ability came off cooldown, and I actually placed it on a second target, so it now started costing 20 per second, and at that point I couldn't really keep up. But if you had dots on, say, like 10 targets, you could have this ability on up to 3 targets maybe, and it deals so much damage. The dot is absolutely absurd. If they bring out an encounter, which is like a council fight next expansion, and this ability stays, holy shit, Boomkins are going to be, like, rubbing their hands. This ability is so strong. By losing Celestial Alignment, you do lose the 15% damage increase. This ability is only a 2-minute cooldown, whereas Celestial Alignment is a 3-minute cooldown. So I really like this ability. I like this one a lot. In terms of single target damage, you can still keep it up for a long time. However, you won't be able to really weave in Star Surges. So if it's a damage increase over Star Surges, I'm not sure. That's something that would have to be worked out. Also on this line, you have Astral Communion. This just instantly generates 75 astral power and has a 1-minute cooldown. I'm not really sure where this ability fits in. It's not really something... I mean, while I've been playing, at least on the alpha, I haven't suddenly thought, Jesus, I'd love to have 75 astral power right now. In no situation whatsoever, so this ability seems a bit lost here. And the last talent is Blessing of the Ancients. This gives you a blessing that lasts permanently, and you can switch between 2 of them. There's Elune and Anshi. Elune makes it so you have increased astral power generated by Solar Wrath and Lunar Strike by 50%, and Anshi just grants you 3 astral power every 2 seconds. So one of them is for when you're doing single target, and one of them's for when you're doing AoE. This talent is okay. I actually played with this talent all the way through the 5-man, and you did notice it. It was pretty useful, but the Collapsing Star talent is so fucking good. I think that is probably the one that you're going to pick in this line for almost all situations, especially AoE situations on long boss fights. Now let's move over and talk about the artifact and the talents that come with it. Now, your passive on your artifact makes it so Alkin Frenzy can proc without being hit. This effect is actually awesome. When you are fighting single target, you very, very rarely will be hitting your Lunar Strike. You will always have the Astral Power to do your Star Surges, as well as have empowered Solar Wraths, so the chance of you hitting a Lunar Strike is very, very low. You're not going to do it in most situations, which means you're going to have 3 stacks of it the entire time, and it's not going to be doing anything. It's just going to be sat there. However, Lunar Strike does do more damage than Solar Wrath, and Alkin Frenzy makes your next cast instant. So if you get a proc, you can drop your Lunar Strike, you get a shit ton of Astral Power, you do more damage than the Solar Wrath, and it drops one of those empowerment effects so it doesn't feel like you're wasting it. And this procs all the time. It procs all the goddamn time, and it does make the class more interactive, but the problem with it is that on Alpha, it's really hard to track these things. You don't have any add-ons. This class without weak auras is an absolute nightmare. It's hard to track dots. It's hard to track your Alkin Frenzy procs. Fairly difficult to track your Astral Power. It's just a, it's just a nightmare, this class. Once I've got access to weak auras, I'm sure it'll be fine. Maybe it's just my playstyle. But yeah, that Alkin Frenzy proc is super useful. As for the talents that you actually get through your artifact, 2 of the talents haven't actually been implemented whatsoever, including the last one, and usually, if you compare them to all the other artifact weapons of the game, the last one is usually something really, really big. It's usually like a spell or something, but the majority of the effects are passive, so you have improved damage on your Lunar Strikes and your Solar Wraths, increased damage on Moonfire and Sunfire, you have crit chance of Lunar Strike, crit chance of Star Surge. Solar Beam's cooldown is reduced based on the amount of targets interrupted. So if you put this in a raiding situation, let's just say maybe you're on a fight like Manaroth, where all the imps are gripped up, they started casting, and then you blow your Solar Beam, that'll pretty much reduce the cooldown so much that it'll be up for the next set of imps, which is pretty cool. There's also a passive that makes it so when you're hit, you actually have a chance to heal yourself with an empowered version of Healing Touch. What an empowered version of Healing Touch is, I have no idea, but the fact that it's a passive and that you don't have to control it whatsoever is pretty damn nice. One of them makes it so while you're in Celestial Alignment, each spell that you cast grants an additional 3% haste speed buff. So on the pool with Bloodlust and Celestial Alignment, you're going to be getting so many casts off really, really quick. Solar Wrath's going to get to a point where it's like a 0.3 second cast and would be pointless, and instead you're forced to use Lunar Strikes, I guess. That, of course, only works when Celestial Alignment's up, so it's not going to be the entire time, but yeah, still pretty interesting. As for the Innovate one, this is the one that I like the most, especially a guy who mains a healer. This makes it so it increases the healing that you and your target deal by 50% while Innovate is active on that target. So instead of throwing Innovate on someone when they actually need the mana from it, you can throw it on them when there's a high healing output situation. Let's just say everyone's really low on health. You can throw it on your monk and he can press revival and it's going to heal for 50% more than it usually would. Or you can throw it on your druid and he can trank, or you can throw it on a priest and they can press nothing. So yeah, that's pretty cool. But one ability that you do get, and it's the earliest talent within the tree, is something called New Moon. Now this is an instant cast that has a 10-second cooldown that just deals a flat amount of damage. However, after you've cast it, the next time you can cast it, it's now a new ability called Half Moon. This has got a cast time and deals slightly more damage, and once you've cast that ability and you go to press it 10 seconds later again, it's now something called Full Moon. This is an absolutely gigantic cast. It's a 4-second cast that deals quite a large amount of damage, but what it does is give you 100 Astral Power. So the 4-second cast, in terms of the damage it deals, is not worth it in comparison. You'd be better off casting Lunar Strike, as an example, over those 4 seconds instead. However, the fact that it gives you 100 Astral Power, this is something that you'd probably press on the pull of a boss. So while you're doing the trash, you do the first 2, and then as soon as the boss starts and the countdown is going down, you'd pre-cast this ability so you start the fight with 100 Astral Power. And then when you'd use it again while the fight is going on, I'm not too sure. You probably wouldn't. It's not really worth it. It doesn't really do enough damage. But starting the fight with that 100 Astral Power is really, really nice. You can just instantly like double Star Surge or whatever you like. So that's really, really nice. So that's all the spells, that's all the talents, that's all the shit with the artifact weapon. The big question is, how does the new Boomkin feel in comparison to the current version on live servers? And, well, I think they've captured the feel of Boomkins. It doesn't feel massively different while you're playing. You're still pressing the same old buttons, and really it's just the way that they work with each other that is different. And in my opinion, it has improved. The main differences, of course, are that you no longer have to track your eclipses, and instead you need to track Astral Power. And personally, as a player that's slightly inexperienced when it comes down to Boomkin, I find Astral Power slightly kinder and probably less punishing if you do make a mistake within your rotation. That might suggest that maybe the class is easier now, but I wouldn't totally agree with that's the case. I think the best Boomkins are going to be the ones that can obviously keep good uptime on their darts. They manage their astral power well, so they can Star Surge as much as possible, just so they do have the empowered Lunar Strikes and Solar Wraths as much as possible, and ultimately be really good at using Alkin Frenzy. If you can use this every single time on empowered Lunar Strikes, you're always going to have enough astral power to keep using those Star Surges to empower your Solar Wraths. I feel like the class is a little bit more involved now, as your rotation is slightly more flexible. An example of this is like on live servers, you're pretty much forced to cast either 3 Wraths or 2 Starfires after you've done a Star Surge to basically deal any significant damage. And instead, you now have the option to press Star Surge as much as you possibly want, with the only limitation being astral power. And because of this, they've kind of added another layer to Boomkins when it comes down to moving during encounters. On live servers, if you are forced to move, you either reapply dots or Star Surge. And if you've already Star Surged within that Eclipse and have empowered Wraths or Starfires, the Star Surge feels kind of wasted. On Alpha, Star Surge is only ever wasted if both your Solar and Lunar empowerments are a maximum stack of 3, which is a very rare situation. And if it's movement that you can predict in advance, the higher skill cap Boomkins can definitely like store astral power before they move, so they can spam Star Surges while they're moving. And I really like that new aspect of the new Boomkin. I feel like the AoE damage is a little bit more interesting now because you actually have to physically place Starfall rather than just run around like a headless chicken, excuse the pun. And with single target, I feel it's similar, but you've got that layer of flexibility with Star Surges buffing both abilities and only empowering them once rather than 3 times. So overall, I like the new Druid. I don't want to compare it to any other classes yet. I don't think that's fair. I think there's still a lot of balancing that needs to be done. But ultimately, I like it. I'm quite impressed. I do like it, but there we go. I don't main Boomkin, so maybe it's not my place to say. But regardless, thank you very much for watching this video, guys. If you did enjoy this little preview, then drop us down a like and let us know in the comments what class you'd like to do next. The plan is to do every single one, and we shall see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.